G'day guys! Combat can be one of the most fun, exciting, rewarding, and powerful phases in Warhammer 40k 10th edition, but in order to unlock that power, you need to understand several different tricks and ways that you can maximize the utility of your units. So today, I'm going to go through my top 5 picks for the most powerful tricks, tactics, strategies, and combos that you can do in the fights phase.
Look for the Blood God.
Alrighty guys, I call this first trick the tail biter. Now, let's say you're a Space Marine player of any variety or any other army that's going to be looking to do some of your damage in combat, and you go up against a World Eaters player. Now, laid out in front of me here, we've got a Master of Executions leading 10 Khorne Berserkers, which is a very common unit that you'll see in World Eaters lists. And in the Space Marine side, we've got a unit of 10 Assault Intercessors. Now, you can swap these units out for any variation, but for this example, the reason we're using Khorne Berserkers is because they have an ability that allows them to fight first, which means if you charge them, they get to activate first, and if they charge you, they get to activate first. So this can be a really challenging problem to solve, especially for an army like Space Marines where they're looking to do some of their damage in combat, like these Assault Intercessors here. Now, basically what's going to happen is normally if you just charge these guys straight across like that, you're going to be engaged with this entire unit of Khorne Berserkers, and when they activate, they're going to be able to fight first, and all of the Berserkers are going to get to make all of their attacks, and they're probably going to wipe out that unit of Assault Intercessors. So, I'm going to show you a nifty little trick on how you can minimize the damage that you take from those Khorne Berserkers. So the first thing we're going to do is just do our movement, which the Intercessors get a 6-inch move. And you're basically going to move your models as far to one side as you possibly can. So it'll look something like this, right? Now you're going to make your charge move. And with that charge move, we just rolled a 7. So a 6 and a 1, that gives us a 7-inch charge move. And basically what you got to try to do is make it so that as many of your models end on this side of the Khorne Berserk unit as possible, given that the character is on that side, and the big axes are on this side as well. If you can end on this side, when they fight first, they're going to be able to make a pile-in move and then their attacks, but a bunch of these models at the back are not going to be able to get within engagement range, and therefore they're not going to be able to allocate attacks onto you. And basically the way this is going to work is with that 7-inch move, every model that can end the move within base contact must do so. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the back here, and we're going to move this bloke in, because he can make base contact. We're going to move this bloke in, because he can make base contact. This bloke here, he can't quite make base contact with that guy, so he's free to move whichever way he wants. This guy could make base contact if he went this way, or if he goes this way. So we're actually going to swing him around to this side of the unit, make base contact with that Berserker holding the banner there. So now we've got this bloke and this bloke, both can't make base contact. This guy can't. This bloke here could, so he must. Into base contact there. And now, based on where I've put the models, no other Assault Intercessors are going to be eligible to make it into base contact, which means they're free to move in whichever direction they want, provided they end closer to the target of the charge. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to use that to move these guys all this way. So he's going to move 7 inches into there, into there, into there, around to here, and then on the back there. And now that you've completed your charge move, you would now go into the fight phase, provided there aren't other combat happening, elsewhere on the table. But for this example, you've finished your charge move. Now, because that Khorne Berserker unit has fights first, they're going to be able to activate, and they're going to be able to make a 3-inch pile-in move, right? These 3 guys here, they can't pile in because they are already within base contact. So this bloke would be able to pile in around there, and this guy would be able to pile into there. But none of the other Khorne Berserkers with their pile-in moves are going to be able to get within base contact of another Berserker that's in base contact with an Intercessor, which means these 6 warriors here will not be able to make attacks when they fight. And that Master of Executions, he's the one that's going to do most of the damage, and these 2 big axes are the ones that are going to do a lot of damage as well. So as a result, you've effectively more than halved the potential damage that you're going to receive from this unit by swinging around and biting the tail. So that's a really good way that you can get around always fights first, or things like combat interruptions. So say you've got multiple combats happening at once, you know that your opponent has 2 command points and they're going to interrupt that combat. You're going to fight there and there. So if you go, cool, I'm going to fight first with this unit, then my opponent's going to interrupt. So I'm going to make sure that with the other unit, I pile in like this, so that when they interrupt, only half of the unit gets to allocate their attacks. So this is a really effective way of mitigating the damage that you receive from enemy units in combat. All right, let's get on to the next trick. Alrighty guys, this next trick I call the pile driver. Now, in this example, we've got 2 units of Adeptus Custodes and a unit of World Eaters. Now, we're going to be playing as the World Eater player in this example, and our goal is to charge and kill both of these units of Adeptus Custodes. Now, the challenge that we're going to face is that this unit here is currently on an objective marker, which means they're going to have the ability to use a stratagem to fight first. So if we charge that one directly, they're going to fight and they're going to kill us before we get to strike. So what we want to use is this unit here. We're going to use that to leverage our pile-in moves so that we can hit that unit before they get to activate. So basically the way that this is going to work is we're going to make our move, and we're going to move closer to the unit that has fight first with the majority of our unit, and then we're going to trail a few guys towards the other unit. And the idea here is we want to make sure that as many of our models are close to the unit that has access to fights first as possible, and the rest are stringing along just to make sure that we don't fail our charge. Then what we're going to do is we're going to declare just the unit that does not have access to fights first as the target of our charge, and ideally here we would like to roll low on the charge roll, but let's have a look. So we rolled an 8. That's relatively high, but I think we're still going to be able to make this work, because basically what that means is that any model that can end within base contact of this unit must, and that means any units essentially within 8 inches, which is just these 4 models here. So these 4 models are going to have to end within base contact of the unit that does not have access to fights first. So he's going to go like that. But now, these models, because they couldn't make it into base contact, are free to move wherever they want, provided they end closer to that unit that has the ability, that doesn't have the ability to fights first, that was the target of our charge. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to move a couple guys to string that coherency, and then we're going to throw the bulk of these guys into this unit, but they have to stay outside of 1 inch. They cannot end within engagement range, because they did not declare that as the target of the charge. So they're going to move something like this into the middle there. So now that Khorne Berserker unit has made a legal charge. They declared just this unit over here, the one that does not have the access to fights first. They've made a move. Every model's ended closer. Those who could end within base have, and they have not ended within 1 inch of this Custodes unit that does have access to fights first. Now we go into the fight phase, and because that unit that has access to fights first is not within engagement range of any enemy models and did not declare a charge itself, it is not eligible to fight in the fight phase. So that means you're going to be able to activate this unit of Khorne Berserkers because they can't fight, and then you're going to be able to pile in to the closest enemy model, which in this case is the unit that has fights first. So you pile in like so, making sure that you keep your coherency string, and now immediately after your pile-in move, you get to make your attacks. So it's important to note that a fight in Warhammer 40k is a pile-in move, making attacks, and a consolidate move. All of those are considered a fight. So even though this unit has an ability to fight first, and based on the normal sequencing, they would fight before these Khorne Berserkers, because they weren't engaged, they're not eligible to be activated for a fight, and then when the Berserkers are activated, they get to do their pile in, make attacks, and then a consolidate. So now this Master of Executions is going to be able to put all of his attacks into this unit and most likely wipe it out, and then these rest of the Berserkers are going to be able to hit this unit of Custodies, pile in onto them, and consolidate in, and basically lock them up so that there's nothing on this objective. So we're able to take that objective off of the Custodies unit, even though they're a very scary combat unit, and they have the ability to fight first. Now, this also works in regards to combat interrupt. Just like I said in the previous trick, if you're worried that your opponent has 2 command points and they're going to make an interrupt move, you can do similar things here as well by making sure that you've charged this unit, they're not in engagement range, and then you charge another unit somewhere else, you can fight somewhere else, and now this unit isn't eligible to interrupt and hit these guys. Really, really powerful trick. The one thing to look out for with this trick, however, is if your opponent has the ability to heroically intervene, because if this unit heroically intervened in, they would then be eligible to fight first. However, for the Custodies in this example, that's unlikely because if they heroically intervene, they probably don't have the command points left to also fight first, in which case you end up in the same situation where you get to just kill everything. So if your opponent has the ability to fight first and heroically intervene, that can be a challenge, so make sure you keep your eye out for that. But generally speaking, this trick is going to get you out of a really tricky situation more often than not. Alrighty guys, this next trick I call the Puncture Wound. Now, in this example, we've got a Falchion Space Marine super heavy vehicle surrounded by some Assault Intercessors, and on the World Leader's side, we have a unit of Khorne Berserkers and we have Angron. Now, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to charge Angron into that Falchion because he's got heavy damage, he's your main way of dealing with heavy armor. And knowing that, what your opponent has done in an attempt to stop you is they've strung a unit of Intercessors around. And by doing so, they've made it so that even with Angron's 16-inch move, he's not going to be able to very easily declare a charge on this Falchion. Because in the charge phase, he can't go over the Intercessors, and he can't end within base contact of the Falchion, or within engagement range. And as a result, he's not able to charge that Falchion. But what we're going to do is we're going to use these Berserkers to do what I call a puncture maneuver, where basically the Khorne Berserkers are going to move up, like so. And then Angron is going to move up, like so, somewhere to there. And now what we're going to do is when we declare our charges, Angron is going to declare a charge into the Intercessors, and he's going to move so that his move ends within 4 inches of that Falchion. Then the Khorne Berserkers are going to move in as well, and basically just make it so that every one of them gets to fight with their charge, whatever their charge roll is. Something like that. And now, in the fight phase, we're going to fight with the Khorne Berserkers first, and in doing so, let's say hypothetically we kill all of these Assault Intercessors, like so. The Berserkers now, after making their attacks, will get to do a Consolidate move, which is irrelevant to this trick. The main thing is that because Angron declared a charge, he is still eligible to fight, which means he's eligible to make a 3-inch pile-in move, which is going to get him within engagement range of that Falchion, and now he's able to make attacks. So even though they had positioned a unit to screen you out and prevent you from being able to eligibly charge the Falchion, you are able to puncture that screen and still get in, provided that they are within 4 inches of each other. So that's one of the ways that you can puncture someone's screen. Now, it is worth noting that if your opponent sets up their screen where they've got their Falchion and then 5 inches in front, 4 or 5 inches in front, they have their Intercessors, that actually breaks this trick. So just note, when you are screening yourself, make sure you leave a good distance between your screen and the thing you're protecting, because now, if Angron charges these Intercessors, that charge move is not going to end within 4 inches of the Falchion. So even if the Berserkers wipe out all these Intercessors, Angron's pile-in move will not get him close enough to the Falchion to allocate attacks onto it. Now, of course, you want to make sure that you don't get too far out. If you come out, say your screen comes out to this distance, right? Well, now Angron with his move could just move over and then charge in. So you want to take into account the base size of the model that you're screening out, if you're the Space Marine player, take into account their base size and make sure that you're not leaving a big enough gap for them to jump over you, but also make sure that you aren't within 4 inches, because otherwise they're going to be able to kill you and then pile in through and get the thing that you were protecting. So that's the way to screen out, and also the way to puncture people's screens. So make sure when you're looking at the table, look at the distances between enemy units and make your plans accordingly. Alrighty guys, this next trick I call the Heroic Ingress. Now let's say you've got a unit of 8 bound here, which is your unit, and your opponent has a unit of aggressors. Now they're strung out, maybe there was a combat happening over there previously, or maybe there was, an aura range they needed to be on, or an objective they needed to be on, so they're strung out, it's their turn, and they're going to charge your 8 bound. And you know that if all of those guys get in, they're going to be able to do some pretty heavy damage to your 8 bound. So what you can do is you can move they move their aggressors forward because they're coming in for the charge, right? And then what you can actually do is at this stage, Rapid Ingress in some Flesh Hounds. Now you can do this with other units as well, but Flesh Hounds are fantastic because they get Heroic Intervention for free. And then basically you place your Flesh Hounds so that they are further than 9 from the aggressors, but as close to your 8 bound as possible, right? And now, and you might even want to filter them through a little bit, but for this example, let's just put them over to the side like that. Now, when your opponent makes their charge roll, they roll in and they get a decent charge there. So they're going to be able to make it in with most of them. However, they're not going to be able to make it in with all of them. So only the first 2 are actually going to be able to make base contact, right? Like so. And then these ones, normally they would want to pile in around here. But in order to do so, if they come across this way, like so, right, you're going to be able to now go, cool, charge done, Heroic Intervention, I roll an 8, so I've got my Heroic Intervention in, and now these Flesh Hounds can come in like so, and tag a bunch of these guys. And what that's going to do is multiple things. One, it's going to mean that the ones that you've got in base contact with your Heroic Intervention, which happens in the charge phase, they are not going to be able to pile in at all. So when it comes time for them to fight, they're not going to be able to make piling moves, and therefore they're not going to be able to get within engagement range of those 8 bound. And further to that, this guy in the middle here, previously he would have been able to pile in to get within base contact of this aggressor and thus fight the 8 bound. But now that you've made your Heroic Intervention, these Flesh Hounds are closer, which means his his pile-in move is going to have to end closer to them, like so. And now you've essentially just forced your opponent to fight Flesh Hounds when they wanted to be fighting your 8 bound. So your opponent, they made the charge, so they're going to fight first. They're probably going to kill all of your Flesh Hounds, but now your 8 bound are going to kill all of those aggressors. And as a result, you still have the 8 bound unit, and they've lost their aggressor unit, which is the exact opposite of the goal that they set out to do. So using Heroic Intervention to put down a unit of Flesh Hounds so that they can heroically intervene out of nowhere really messes with your opponent's plans, because they wouldn't have factored that in because the Flesh Hounds weren't there. The 8 bound were out on their own, so they would have gone, yep, cool, I can just charge in. Simple, right? But it's not that simple if you have a unit of Flesh Hounds in reserves that you can rapid ingress after your opponent has moved and telegraphed where they're going to charge. This works with other units as well, but Flesh Hounds are fantastic for it because they get a free Heroic Intervention, which is really good, and also they get Deep Strike, so they can drop it anywhere on the table. Whereas other units like, say, Berserkers or Jackals, they can do the similar thing, but they would have to come in from the table edge, and they would also have to pay command points in order to heroically intervene. So Flesh Hounds are fantastic for this. Plenty of other armies have similar units that do really fantastic work in this regard as well. But the core of this strategy is using Rapid Ingress and Heroic Intervention to force your opponent to fight models that they weren't planning to fight, allowing you to keep your precious units alive and able to strike back with them. So that is the Heroic Ingress. And for the last trick of the video, we're going to be talking about the mob block strategy. Now, in this example, we've got that same unit of Custodians from earlier. they're sitting on an objective and they have the command point, so they're going to be able to fight first. However, in this scenario, there isn't a second unit. So we're not going to be able to use the pile driver strategy, because in order for that to work, you need a second unit that you can declare a charge into and then swing your pile-in moves to make your attacks. In this instance, it's just one unit and they're just sitting there on the objective, and as a result, the pile driver strategy won't work. However, don't despair too much, because there's another strategy that you can use provided you have 2 units. So in this example, we've got a unit of jackals here and the unit of Khorne berserkers. Now those Khorne berserkers, if they get to fight first, are going to mince that unit. However, we need to play around the custodian's ability to fight first. And the way we're going to do that is we're basically going to move the jackals in first, like so. And we're going to and then the berserkers. And we're going to use a similar thing to the tail biter, where we're going to move these berserkers so that they're all the way to one side of the unit, like so. And then what we're going to do is with the jackals, we're going to do their charge first. So we roll the charge. They got a nice big 8-inch charge, which means all of these jackals can end within base contact of those custodians. But what we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that we base contact every model. So even though all of them could go on this tail, we want to make sure that we're base contacting every model, like so. And then once we've done that, we just want to sort of fill in around. The rest of the movement is not particularly relevant as long as you've got every one of those custodians in base contact. Because now, when these Khorne berserkers make their charge, which they only roll a 5, so quite a small charge there, they're basically going to be able to go tag this guy at the end here, and then the rest of the guys pile in behind, right? Or move in behind. So now, that custodian's unit is eligible to fight first. They can spend the 2 command points, but because the useless unit of jackals, the one that we don't care about, that's only 70 points, because they declared a charge, and because they put themselves in base contact with every one of those custodians, only this single custodian can allocate his attacks into the Khorne berserkers, because he's the only one that's within base contact of a Khorne berserker. Everybody else is within base contact only with jackals. And these custodians were also not within base contact of each other, and thus can't put their attacks through each other. So you've basically got a situation here where if that custodian's player wants to, they could spend the 2 CP and they could interrupt, or they could fight first, but in doing so, all they're going to do is eliminate that unit of jackals, because that unit of berserkers is still going to come in hard, and one custodian is not going to kill many berserkers. And even when they do, say that custodian goes crazy and kills 3, you just remove 3 from the back, 3 that weren't likely to be able to make attacks anyway, as your casualties. And now when you activate, these berserkers can pile around with their pile-in moves, because they weren't in base contact. Master of Executions piles into a bloke that was already in base contact, so he can fight. And now that unit of berserkers is going to wipe their whole way through that unit of custodians. So this is playing on the fact that you can prevent your opponent from being able to pile in, and therefore you can prevent them from attacking things that they don't want to. It's a similar play to the Rapid Ingress Heroic Intervention strategy, and with the Tail Biter strategy built in together, so that you can use 2 units to stop one unit from fighting first and wiping you out. And like I've said with every other combo here, this is also really effective if your opponent has the 2 CP to interrupt combat, because sometimes you'll have situations where you might want to be in combat with 3 or 4 different things, but you know that if you do so, you're going to fight first somewhere, and then your opponent's going to spend 2 CP to interrupt and fight somewhere else. And that could be devastating for this sort of game plan. So what you do is you go, cool, the other thing, I'm going to throw Angron into a unit of custodians over there, and then I'm going to do this trick here. I'm going to fight with Angron first, and now if my opponent spends the 2 command points to interrupt here, they're only going to be able to kill 1 Khorne berserker. So either way, you get around it. They can either fight first here, kill 1 Khorne berserker, and then these berserkers finish that off, and Angron finishes the other unit off. Or they can go, Angron fights first, and then they're going to use 2 CP to interrupt the sequence and fight here. Either way, they still only kill a single berserker or a small handful of berserkers, and they still lose both units. So that's a really effective way of using a unit to block and force your opponent to allocate attacks in certain directions. And this is one of the reasons why I think a unit of jackals in every World Eaters list, units of cultists in every Chaos Space Marine list, any way that you can get multiple bodies for cheap that you are happy to lose, those units are immensely valuable, especially in the combat matchups. Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed those tips, tricks, and strategies. I hope you found them useful, and I hope you can apply them to your games of Warhammer 40k to improve your chances of winning when you're playing those combat-heavy games. If you'd like to show your support for the channel, you can head over to blogforthebloodgod.com and you can pick up some merchandise like what I've got on the side here with the objective markers, there's dice, there's the neoprene gaming mat which you saw used in this video, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff like the t-shirts that I'm wearing now. All kinds of really cool merchandise available over on that website, and every time you buy one I get a couple of bucks, which helps me improve the quality of this content that I put out for you guys. You can also join our Patreon and Discord community where I do one-on-one coaching and we do list writing advice, we do all kinds of different stuff in there, and we also just have a ton of fun in that Discord. There's a lot of memes and banter, and it's just a good time hanging out. And sometimes we do weekly, fortnightly phone calls with the higher tiered Patreon members where we discuss things one-on-one in person. So plenty of really cool stuff, and if you want more information, head over to blogforthebloodgod.com. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Log for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed those tips, I hope you enjoyed